Well, welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to begin in Chapter 2, which involves strategy and strategic planning. Now, it goes without saying, any company, any organization, any church that doesn't have a strategy and no strategic plan to meet their strategic objectives is an entity that's not going to last very long. So today we're going to begin with the fundamentals of strategy, what it is, why it's important. We're going to take a look also at strategic planning and some of the fundamentals that go along with it and see how both of them tie in to be able to equip you to be a better leader, whether it's in your ministry or in your business. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be in Chapter 2, which deals with human resource strategy and planning. Now, Chapter 2 discusses how we can really be a part of the strategic planning process and all of the elements that go into it. Now, as your textbook indicates, over the past several decades, the strategic role of HR has been emphasized because firms realize that high-quality employees are needed to help them reach their strategic objectives. The strategic landscape is expected to continually change as new issues challenge companies to more effectively use their employees. There are also opportunities that companies can seize to be more successful, which all require support and guidance from HR leaders. So let's take a look today at some of the elements of human resource strategy and planning. Now, as you can see by the diagram, strategy is a plan an organization follows for how to compete successfully, survive, and grow. Now, you have a strategy. Today, your strategy is to get your degree. Now, some of you may be looking at just getting some classes to get an associate's or a bachelor's, master's. So whatever your strategy is, you're here today because you have a plan of growing. You have a plan that you want to be successful in. And that would be an example of strategy. What about your church? How do you have in your church a strategy? Do you have a ministry? What's your end goal for that ministry? Do you want to produce disciples? Do you want to increase your numbers? Do you want to be able to expand ministries within your area? All of these outcomes is what we would call a strategy. So you have the overall goal. Now, how do you get there? Well, that's through strategic planning. Strategic planning is defining organizational strategy or direction and allocating resources towards that achievement. So strategy is the end result. Strategic planning is the processes and the resources and the scheduling and all of the things that involve making sure that you reach that strategy. Now, Figure 2.1 talks about the strategic planning process. And as you can see, it's fairly intricate. You have within it, the first part is the organizational mission. And we're going to talk about all of these elements as we move on. But from the mission, you have a SWOT analysis. And from that SWOT analysis, you'll establish goals and objectives. And from that, you'll formulate organizational strategies. And then you'll formulate supporting functional strategies. And then you'll implement, and finally you'll evaluate and reassess. You know, you just didn't get up one day and decide, hey, I'm going to get my degree in organizational leadership or get my degree in Christian studies. And boom, I'm here at Mid-America. You did some planning. You looked at where you are right now or where you were when you began your career in academics. And then you saw where you wanted to be, the end result, the strategy, and then everything in between is what you're doing now. You're making those efforts to make your strategy come true and fulfilled. So that's really what you see here. Within this diagram, you see in a more detailed sense just the process of planning for what you want to do from where you're at right now. Now, what's the organizational mission? Well, it's defined as the core reason for the existence of the organization and what makes it unique. Now, this is a simple statement, but folks, I can tell you this has profound consequences. Most every time I've gone to organizations who have asked me to go in and help them, I used to troubleshoot organizations. I would go in and I would take a look at companies that were in trouble, schools that were in trouble, and even churches that were trying to change, to go to a new direction. And every organization that I went to, notwithstanding, everyone that was in trouble, none of them knew their mission statement. Now, your mission statement tells you who you are. It tells you what you value right now, what you're all about, the things that are important to you, and how you do business or how you do ministry. It makes no difference if you're a church or an organization. Everyone should have a mission statement. So that mission statement gives you that sense of identity. And as we saw last week, that culture, a lot of times the culture will feed off the mission statement, and the culture will evolve as a result of that mission statement. For instance, your mission statement at church, do you know it? You should have one. Ask your pastor if you have a mission statement. And if you do, how much aligned is your mission statement with the way that you actually do things? Hopefully there'll be one and the same. Places like Federal Express, they place a heavy emphasis on mission statements. In fact, many of them, I think their employees are required to put it on a little card and put it around their neck on a lanyard so that if anyone should ever ask them, what is the mission of Federal Express, they would be able to say it because it's right there. So a mission statement is your identity. Now, as I said before, sometimes you don't know the mission statement, and that's a bad sign, or sometimes you may have the mission statement articulated, but you don't follow the mission statement. Either one of those scenarios will not turn out to produce a good organization, whether it's a church or whether it's a business. You need to be able to practice what you're preaching, and that's what a mission statement actually does. It's preaching something to the environment and to the employees and to the ministers, and you should live by that statement. Now, strategy formulation. I'm going to go ahead and just put those out there. Strategy formulation is really the game plan that you want to create in order to get to where you want. Not only do businesses need to know who they are, but they also need to know where they're going. Now, as you see here in the slide, a strategy formulation is kind of a long-range plan. This is what we call in many organizations a vision statement. It's the down-the-road strategy that companies want to achieve in the next, well, as you see here, around 3 to 5 years. It's difficult to project anything further out than that, and anything within 3 years really should be short-term goals and objectives. But it's more than just saying we want to accomplish this in the next few years. You have to consider several things. First of all, you need to consider your internal and external forces. And you do that by analyzing your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, that is what we call a SWOT analysis. Now, we're going to take a look at what a SWOT analysis is a little bit later on. But a SWOT analysis, well, it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it's what you can use to determine where you're at in your ministry, in your business, or even in your personal life. And then you need to determine your objectives. Once you know where you want to be, what are going to be those specific things that you want to accomplish that will ultimately lead you to the final strategic accomplishment. And then once you've determined those objectives, you need to formulate strategies to meet those objectives. And this is what managers have to focus on. You have to focus on the strategies that will accomplish the goal, the overall goal of the organization, and you focus on the strategy by making sure that the objectives are being met. Now, Figure 2.2 looks at positioning HR to be a strategic partner. And what do we mean by that? Well, there's a two-prong approach. First of all, we need to aspire in ways that support the strategy. And as you see here in the slide, that means to express the direction of goals, motivate managers to act. Now, this element here, the aspiration side of it, shows how these partnerships can be developed. Now, these partnerships can be strengthened when HR professionals know what the organization does and when they make good decisions about building human capital, being willing to change and communicating the intent of HR policies and follow through on their plans. So what you're doing here is you're aspiring to align, to partner with those that will be able to support the strategic objectives of that organization and subsequently HR. But not only are you to aspire to go in the direction of the organization and support that organization, you're also there to inspire others to support the strategy. And this is more of the encouragement side. You want to encourage coordinated goal settings, bring goals together for reflection. And how do you do that? Well, the workers need to understand the relevant HR priorities so that they can better contribute by applying their skills to advance the strategic goals. So partnerships should also be fostered with the employees. Employees who understand the big picture can do their jobs in ways that help the firm reach its objectives. And I've often asked some of my professional students if they knew where they fit in the organization. I teach some master classes for other schools, and these are professionals in the business world. And the jobs that they are doing right now for their organization, many of them don't even know where they fit in to the organization. They'll say, no, we just do our job. We go in, we clock in, we do our thing for 8 hours, and then we leave. There's no buy-in, there's no cohesion, there's no loyalty because they really don't know how valuable they are or even if the organization appreciates them. So I would ask them, do you know how your contribution affects the overall organization? And by and large, they would say no. Now that has a big impact on motivation and loyalty. If you don't know where you are within an organization, how you stand up in that organization, how valued you are, or what your contribution does to the overall effectiveness of the organization, then you're going to have a person who is really disengaged. So being able to inspire others through effective communication is important. Now, there are other HR contributions to strategy. First of all, you have a seat as an HR professional at the strategic table. Now, companies have to include HR professionals in discussions about strategy and encourage them to provide input. If you remember when we were looking at the history of HR was considered to be just a necessary evil. They weren't considered to be really anything of value to that organization other than just processing paperwork. But today, because of diversity, because of globalization and technology, companies have had to step back and revisit their ideology and their attitudes towards HRM so that they're no longer just an entity in the organization, they're a strategic partner within the organization. Also, that means we have to be knowledgeable about business practices, understand how the business works, and knowing the need for certain strategies are important components. Today you see degrees that involve, organizational leadership, HR management, organizational development and training, operations management. These are all degrees that have emerged fairly recently in response to diversity, globalization, and technology. In the past, you had, if you wanted to go to business school, you got your degree in business administration, and that was it. You looked at the hard sciences, accounting, finance, marketing, statistics. There were very few opportunities for HR or the human element to be incorporated in these degree plans. But since the Civil Rights Act has become what it is today, You have all types of litigation that accuse and really convict people of discrimination and so forth, and you have to deal with that. You also have a melting pot of organizational diversity in business today and in ministry. How do you treat them fairly, given the fact that they are of different cultures and different beliefs and values and so forth? So you need to know that within HR, you have the business aspect, but you also have that human aspect. And the degrees that you're seeing now is the response that academia has provided so that we can bridge the gap between the hard business, the bottom line, and taking care of people. Also, focusing on the future. Strategic planning requires leaders to think about the future based on past experiences, and this is what we call forecasting. Where do you want to be 5 years down the line? Well, if you know where you're going, in order to know where you're going, you need to know where you've been. And you need to be able, from past experiences, look to the future. And that's what businesses are forced to do today. You can't just sit still. No company today is going to be successful just by sitting on their laurels and enjoying the success that they may have right now, because it's going to fade quickly. As competition comes into the arena through globalization and technology, people are constantly having to look for the future. Even in churches today, we're having to look for the future. We're having to look at trends, and we're having to look at cultures and see how we can accommodate and minister to the future needs of people. So focusing on the future is another contribution to strategy. Also, prioritizing business goals. And these efforts have the greatest impact on the business and its objectives because you're emphasizing what should come first. Now, you can't be all over the organization, and you can't know what the priority for that organization is from a marketing standpoint or from a research and development standpoint, but you can prioritize your HR efforts and let the organization know that when it comes to the human resource aspect, these are the things that we need to prioritize first. And that helps ground them. That helps focus them on the things that they need to really hone in on so that they can become more efficient and effective. And then you have understanding what to measure. Now, we're going to be taking a look at metrics. And we looked at that a little bit the first week when we took a look at goals and so forth. But we're going to get into that a little bit more next week and in the days ahead here this week as we take a look at formulas for return on investment and cost of labor and all of that. But understanding what we should measure is essential. HR deals a lot in statistics, and it deals a lot in what we call quantifiable evidence. That means we should be able to measure productivity and be able to translate that measurement into objectives and goals. And that's one of the other contributions that HR makes. Now, your textbook talks about multinational corporations. Now, a multinational corporation is an organization that has facilities and other assets in at least one country or other countries than its home country. For instance, and I believe we talked about this also earlier, but let's say, for instance, I am the CEO of FedEx, and I want to start a business up over in Thailand. And I'm sure FedEx is in Thailand. And if I wanted to create an operation in Central America and then Russia and so forth, that would make me a multinational corporation. Now, there are all kinds of considerations that we need to look at when we are running a multinational corporation. First of all, from a staffing standpoint, how much of the business do we want run by our own people in the host country, or how many will run it by going out and looking at people from that country to run it? Now, offshoring would be an example of that. It's relocation of a business process or operation from one country to another. That's really outsourcing on a global scale. So there may be an operation, let's say Ford Motor Company. It's creating maybe their carburetors in Tokyo, Japan. And it's not a part of Ford. The company is not a part of Ford, but they make Ford products. That's offshoring. In fact, there was some scandal in Japan by a Japanese manufacturer, I think, of seat belts. And they put the seat belts in some of our cars, and the seat belts were defective. So there was a big scandal over that a couple of years ago. But that would be offshoring. That would take an element of your business and letting someone overseas do that and bring it back to you. Now, expatriate, we talked about that, I believe, earlier, where the citizen of one country employed in a second country by a company in the first country. Really what that means is if I send someone to Thailand to represent our company, to manage that company in Thailand, that person would be an expatriate. And then also leadership development is critical. Leading in different cultures requires skills. How do you manage diversity the way it is now? Not only do you have racial diversity, you also have cultural diversity, religious diversity, and now you have gender and sexual diversity. So there are all types of challenges that companies are now having to face when it comes to just this one element, different cultures. And when you go to foreign countries and their operation shuts down 5 times a day to pray to Allah, or if you go to Central America where they may take 2 or 3 hours to have a break or lunch, or you go to the Mediterranean where most of them don't really want to work past 4 or 5 hours because they value the family more than work. These are all considerations that you have to make when you're looking at a global strategy. Now, part of that global strategy, you see here the different approaches to international staffing. You have the ethnocentric policy, and this is where managers from headquarters staff key positions. That means you're the expatriate, you're going overseas. And the benefit to that is that you control the locations. There's an ease of transfer of policies because you know how things work in the U.S., so you can just transfer that over to whatever country you're going to. And then there's a polycentric policy. This is where the host country nationals staff key positions. And this is letting someone from Thailand run that operation. Now, the benefit to that is that you'll reduce cultural mishaps and misunderstandings, but coordinating with headquarters may be problematic. That person may be under the cultural influence of that country, and you're trying to do business with them, and that person is having to go back and forth between what the company wants and what the culture demands and so forth. So that could be problematic. Then you have regiocentric policy. And here key positions are filled by individuals in the region of the subsidiary, which they give you the example of the European Union. The European Union is a confederation of countries that have come together and they do business with each other. So you may have a operation, and if you want to go to Edsel, Scotland, and you want to produce or create a business there, you may have to do business with that union, that region, to be able to have your operation going. And then you have a geocentric policy, and that's an international cadre of skilled managers who are assigned to global subsidiaries regardless of nationality. So this is the leveraging of the expertise and the skills of people from all nations who can go in and they can manage that organization no matter where it may be within the global confines of your scope and your market. Now that's going to be all for today, and we will move on to the next section of strategic planning tomorrow. Well, everyone, that concludes the first section of Chapter 2. where we talked about the strategy and the importance of strategy and the strategic planning process. Now, tomorrow we'll go into a little more detail, but it's enough to know right now that strategy is the end result. It's where you want to be. And strategic planning, these are the means and ways by which you can make your strategy happen. Until tomorrow, God bless you, and I'll talk to you then.